It's divisional weekend Monday. Not the weekend coming on with the wild card. So now we look ahead to the next round of the playoffs. The first round of the playoffs for the Eagles. And we know the opponent. It's Big Blue, New York Giants, here to give us some insight on where the Eagles sit right now. Is one of the best in the business. He does it for SI with Johnny Mac. Our buddy Ed Kracz jumps aboard here on Birds 365. EK, how you feeling?
Getting there, Jody. Getting there. Slow and steady, baby.
Yeah, this is a big test spread. Getting up early. And you look good, buddy.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
That makes two of you. So you're not gonna get any sympathy from me, Kracz.
All right. I don't know if you've heard this, Ed, but it's hard to beat a team 3 times in the playoffs. The Eagles will have to do that in the divisional round against the mighty New York Giants. Is it even possible to do something like that? Because I've heard on social media, it's really, really, really difficult.
Well, it's the first time I think the Eagles are playing a team that they have already beaten twice in their history.
Yes.
If I'm reading that correctly, I think I've seen that from a couple different outlets. So that's a first if they can do it. I think it's hard to beat a team twice in the same year, and the Eagles have struggled to do that. When they played Washington a second time and Dallas a second time, and now here they are with New York a third time, and that second one really doesn't count because the Giants didn't play anybody.
Exactly.
So I think that familiarity does make it a little more difficult. I don't know if it has to do with playing the same team 2 or 3 times, but I just think playing this Giants team, and if it would have been Dallas, and it still might be Dallas 2 weeks down the line, just that familiarity because they're in the same division and they play each other twice every single year is what could make this a pretty very good test for the Eagles.
And a lot of these stats and trends are based on history, and the further you get away from the date that you're on, the less water it holds. They beat them twice this year. You're right. Only, and the second game didn't really mean a lot because the Giants were playing second and or third team players in some spots. So you could pretty much throw that one out. They beat the snot out of the Giants 6 weeks ago in their house by more than 3 touchdowns. How did the Giants overcome something like that?
Well, I think that game is water under the bridge at this point. You could say it's only 6 weeks ago, but these are 2 different teams now. Jalen Hurts was healthy in that game. He's not going to be healthy. Lane Johnson was healthy. He's not going to be healthy. And the Giants are playing with a lot of confidence, especially after going into Minnesota and playing a really, really good game. I was really surprised at how well they played, to be honest. They came out cooking and didn't let Minnesota really get back into it. I mean, I know the Vikings tied it and everything, and then the Giants took the lead. But I just think they're 2 different teams at this point. I know it was just last month that they played, and the Eagles tattooed them 48-22. They scored on their first 3 possessions, touchdowns. But the Eagles haven't been that same team since then, and now they're a little banged up, and that's cause for concern.
Yeah, and that's the biggest concern, obviously. I think, it's really, and we know Lane Johnson's going to play, but we have to see how effective he can be playing through that core muscle tear, which is in his groin, the adductor.
Yeah.
Get it right for Dr. Jess. But Jalen Hurts, to me, is the biggest issue, and not he's going to play as well, but to me, are the Eagles going to limit him because they're concerned about the shoulder injury? Very similar to the Week 18 game against the Giants, where I think a lot of people said, well, the Eagles went vanilla because they might play the Giants, and a lot of people argued they probably would play the Giants, and it turned out to be that correct. But I don't think it was a vanilla. They just took the zone read out of the offense, and they took the zone read out of the offense because they wanted to protect the quarterback. If they have to continue in that vein, then I think things get much muddier offensively for the Eagles. I don't think it has anything to do with other than taking the biggest threat of the offense out of the offense. Is that a concern for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're taking out really not most, but probably half of Jalen Hurts' game, and that's the zone read, the ability to beat another team with his legs. And we didn't see the Eagles do any of that inside the red zone. And it could be a game plan where, hey, we're not going to just, not run the zone read, but we're going to pick our spots to do it. And maybe those spots are inside the red zone where they might take kind of the wraps off of him. And I guess it's just going to be a pain tolerance thing with Jalen. I mean, there's no more tomorrows, right? I mean, you almost have to go in with a game plan with no restrictions, because if you lose, you're not going to play the next day, obviously.
Yeah.
And if you win and your quarterback's a little banged up, then you cross that bridge at that time. So, if it was me, I would probably just go in with no restrictions in the game plan. But the Eagles might decide that, hey, we're going to pick our spots to do the zone read to protect them a little bit, but, maybe take the wraps off at times when they really feel like they need to. Because to me, this offense can't operate without Jalen Hurts' legs being a part of it.
Ed, when will we know? And we won't know till after the game when we get to actually ask the participants, Jalen Hurts, Shane Steichen, and Nick Sirianni. But when will we have a pretty firm grasp in our own mind as to how much restrictions are put on Jalen Hurts? Is there a juncture? Is there a type of play call? Is there anything that in the first quarter we could see and say, all right, there are no restrictions? Or we say, they're calling it the same way they did when these two teams played 2 weeks ago. Is there any telltale sign that you think you'll be able to pick up on?
Yeah, that's a good question. It could be like I watched some of this Rocky marathon while I've been quarantining here at home. And, when they came out, he was a left-handed fighter. And then they switched up to being a righty like halfway through the fight to kind of throw off Apollo. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see the Eagles maybe do that, kind of play it a little vanilla. And then at some point, like in the second quarter or whatever, okay, let's start using the zone read. Let's throw them off balance a little bit. I'd kind of like to see that approach, but I don't know if there'll be a telltale sign. I mean, if they start doing it in the first quarter, then I don't think they're going to stop doing it in the second and third quarter unless Jalen Hurts' shoulder is really killing him. But I would kind of like to see that as, hey, we're going to come out, we're going to do our thing without Jalen being too much involved, and then bam, switch up mid-game and start hitting him with the legs of Hurts.
All right. Typically, I crap on the Giants a little bit because I don't think they're a very good team from a playoff perspective. I think Brian Daboll's done a tremendous job. Obviously, they're a good team. I just don't think they're, at the level of the top tier playoff teams like the Eagles and San Francisco. But I give Wink Martindale a lot of credit in that game yesterday because we all know Wink's reputation. Blitz, blitz, blitz. He's going to blitz from the buses. He didn't blitz much because he was savvy enough to know he could get home with 4. Bad offensive line that was missing 2 starters on top of it. Needed to bracket Justin Jefferson. You can't just give him go balls with that blitz. So he changed and went away from his typical modus operandi. Does that go back to blitzing from the buses because of Jalen Hurts' shoulder on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think if Lane Johnson, and then my concern with Lane is we've seen games where he's tried to play through some things and he can't quite do it, and he's taken out after 5, 6 snaps or 10 snaps, and kind of ruining the continuity there. That's kind of my concern. Is he'll start, but I don't know if he'll finish because of that adductor tear. But with the Eagles' offensive line being still one of the best in the NFL, I mean, I think Wink's going to have to probably blitz like he always seems to do against the Eagles. I mean, it always seems like they bring an extra rusher against Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. Then the Eagles leave in the block. And the Eagles are going to have to account for that because I don't think Martindale's going to try to get home with his 4 guys. I think he's going to have to blitz to put pressure on Hurts. He always does it. So I don't see him having that same game plan. I mean, the Vikings' offensive line was in disarray, had some injuries. But the Eagles, even without Lane, if he were to kind of limp off, they're still pretty good. But the Eagles are going to have to figure that out because Jalen Hurts did a lot of running, a lot of scrambling, a lot of, didn't really have time to scan the field too much in that meeting, even in round 2 when they played their backups. So, the Eagles are going to have to be ready for the blitz, and they're going to have to figure it out because I think Wink Martindale is going to do it.
The Giants did put up 31 points yesterday. against a Viking defense that's not very good. But Daniel Jones threw for 300 yards. That's not bad in the playoffs. When you're throwing for 300 yards against any other playoff team, that's pretty good. And yeah, they're nameless, faceless, Isaiah Hodgins and Richie. They're wide receivers. Nobody knows, but they are making plays. Will the Eagles defense give enough respect to the Giants offense that has improved over the course of the year?
Yeah, Daniel Jones played a really good game. I mean, not only throwing for those 301 yards, he ran for 78. He ran, I think it was a career high 17 times in the game. So
17 times. I've heard that number before. What are they trying to get him killed at, Kracz?
Yeah, a lot of those times the field was just wide open. So
yeah, exactly.
That's another thing. As much as the offense has to prepare for the Martindale blitz, they still have, on the defensive side, they're going to have to keep somebody in with an eye on Jones. I think they might need a spy. They might need a Kaiser White to keep an eye on him to kind of make sure he doesn't kill him in the run game, because that's where he made a lot of his plays. And then when he started doing that, that really opened up the passing game. So they're going to have to restrict Jones. And I know, I think in that first meeting, the Eagles sacked Jones, and then Tyrod Taylor came in and they sacked him 7 times. Brandon Graham had 3 sacks in that first meeting that the Eagles beat on them. So there's no reason they can't do that again. I mean, I think this Giants offensive line is pretty good, but it's not great. I think the Eagles can get to Jones, but they have to make sure Jones doesn't get to them, and they have to make sure he doesn't take off running, when he sees an open lane. They're going to have to make sure they understand where he is at all times. And if that means putting a spy on him and, taking somebody out of, the downfield scheme, then so be it.
Yeah, that and I would say this about Daniel Jones, because I think he's played very well this year. I think Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka have been tremendous for him. I think the most impressive part is he doesn't turn the football over anymore. He used to be a turnover machine under other coaches who didn't stress it as much. He's always had that athleticism. You remember the big run at Lincoln Financial Field where he tripped over himself. But, we go back to that trope. It's hard to beat a team 3 times. I look at it from the other perspective. The Eagles know what Daniel Jones can do as a runner. They're more cognizant of it because they're used to playing the Giants, whereas they tend to surprise some other teams when he shows up and he's more athletic and better than people think. So in some ways, I think the familiarity part of it might help the Eagles even more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And you're right about him not turning the ball over. And, listen, this is a franchise on the rise. There's no doubt, with Brian Daboll in charge now. And if Mike Kafka returns, I mean, I would think yesterday would help Mike Kafka's chances possibly for becoming a head coach in this league. Very good offensive coordinator. But this is a team on the rise. If they get Jones some weapons that aren't named Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins, and they get him. I know Daniel Bellinger is a pretty decent tight end, but they're going to be a dangerous team, and I think they already are dangerous. But you're right, John. That familiarity could help the Eagles when it comes to Jones. I mean, they've seen this guy now at least one game this year, but they've played him several times over the past few years. So they should be familiar with him and how he can beat you with his legs. And Gannon can't let that happen. He's got to make sure he beats him in the pass game, that he doesn't pick up 78 yards on the ground like he did against the Vikings.
All right. I said this last week here on the show, even before we knew who the Eagles were going to be playing, that a potential breakout guy in the Eagles' first playoff game this year could be their tight end, Dallas Goedert. I watched TJ Hawkinson just rip the Giants to shreds yesterday. 10 receptions for 129 yards. They actually did a good job of keeping Justin Jefferson under wraps, but they had no answer for TJ Hawkinson. How big a game could Goedert have against the Giants this week?
Yeah, he missed that first game against the Giants. He wasn't available. But again, familiarity, the Giants know who Dallas Goedert is, but do they have anybody that can cover him? And you're right. Seeing what Hawkinson did against the Giants defense, Dallas Goedert could be really, he could be a real thorn in the Giants' side if the Eagles choose to throw him the ball. But we all know, really, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith I kind of combined their names because they're really one and the same. They're two very dangerous receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I mean, those are the guys I think the Eagles are going to try to get the ball to also. But remember, too, in that first game against the Giants, the Eagles ran for like 250-plus yards. I thought the Vikings probably should have tried to run the ball a little bit more. I mean, I know they fell behind early, but they were never really out of it to get away from the running game. So I think the Eagles can do some damage there in the run game. But really, we've seen how this Eagles team has lost in the past, and it's turning the ball over and losing the time of possession. So the Eagles really, first and foremost, have to make sure they don't have any turnovers or limit the turnovers. They can't turn it over 4 times like they did in 2 of their 3 losses, and they have to be able to get off the field on third down. The Giants had that ball for that long drive that led to a field goal, like almost 11 minutes.
Yeah, 19 plays.
Yeah.
For those who hate the Vic Fangio scheme, you see the good version. You don't see the bad version. You got to see the bad version with Minnesota and the Chargers. So I hope people were watching those 2 games. Well, you had the good and the bad in the Chargers game because they were darn good early, but they kind of fell apart.
Yeah, but you can't have the Giants offense converting third downs, fourth downs, and holding the ball for 10 minutes on a drive. I mean, you have to get off the field if you're the Eagles defense, and that's been kind of how you beat this team, is control the ball and force turnovers. So that's where it has to start. Dallas Goedert, obviously a really huge piece to get going against this team that had trouble guarding TJ Hawkinson, but it has to start with no turnovers and getting off the field on third down.
All right, let's stem some of the angst some of the fan base is going to have after watching the Giants play so impressively against Minnesota. I know you're breaking down this game from a personnel perspective. The Eagles, I would argue the Eagles are better everywhere except running back. And that's not an insult to Miles Sanders. That's just Saquan Barkley's a really, really talented player. You see him in the passing game, obviously as a running back, just really, really talented. Everywhere else, even special teams, I would call it wash. The Eagles aren't good at special teams, but either are the Giants. Everywhere else, the Eagles are better. Am I wrong?
Well, yeah, I listen, slightly at running back. I mean, the Eagles have more of a committee type of situation. I know Miles Sanders, obviously their lead back, 1,200 plus yards rushing, 11 touchdowns, comparable numbers actually to what Barkley did this season in terms of yards on the ground and touchdowns. But Barkley's a much bigger threat out of the backfield. But the Eagles combat that with Kenny Gainwell, who, he's having a pretty good end of the season here. I think he's got a reception in 7 straight games. I think he's caught 14 passes for 119 yards over these last 7 games. So he's becoming, we saw him struggle in training camp. We saw him struggle at the start of the year, but he seems like he's playing better now. So he's kind of that threat out of the backfield. And then, of course, Boston Scott, you have
Giant
to
killer.
factor
Yeah,
this as well. I mean,
that prop bet in early, by the way, people get it in. Boston Scott touchdown. Get it in.
And the Eagles know it too, and they play to it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some touches down inside the red zone to try to get him that touchdown. I'd even like to see them use him on a wheel route coming out of the backfield and see if they can get him the ball in the passing game. But yeah, I think you have to factor that in when you're looking at who you're going to give the edge here to, as the Eagles are more of a committee approach and they have Boston Scott. But I think you're right. I think the Giants probably would have a slight edge at running back just because Saquon is so darn good. And then I also gave him the edge at safety. I think Julian Love and Xavier McKinney are
that's
good.
the other part you can argue. They're good players, but
yeah, they're good. And Chauncey Gardner, is he going to be a slot? I mean, we don't know what Maddox's situation is in terms of returning. I don't think, I know they made a couple IR moves going into last week's game. I don't think he was one of them, unless I'm wrong about.
No, Avante. No. Avante's still on the roster.
Yeah,
but yeah, still uncertain.
So yeah, if he can return, that would certainly help, and then you can just put CJ back at his safety rather than kind of bouncing in between, slot and safety. So I just give the edge a little bit at safety to the Giants. Julian Love led the team in tackles, had a couple interceptions. Xavier McKinney missed a lot of time with an injury. I think he only played 9 games, but it's a very good duo that they have at safety. So I'd give a slight edge to the Giants there. And the defensive line, even, I know the Eagles have greater depth on the interior, but Dexter Lawrence is, he's tremendous.
Great player.
He
But
is
the Eagles
really
are so deep on the defense. I mean, they're deeper.
You have
than
to go with the
everyone.
depth there. The Eagles can run Joseph and Sue and Davis out there, and the Giants don't have that depth. But the guys they play with Leonard Williams, who really played, I thought, pretty solid yesterday against the Vikings. Those two are very good, Lawrence and Williams. So they're close in the defensive line, but again, I give the Eagles probably the edge there as well.
Just got a text from Miles Sanders. He says, challenge accepted, McMullen. Just make sure John knows that I only outrushed Saquon Barkley 144.
And by the way,
28.
Miles will take that challenge because obviously they're good friends from their Penn State days, and he always gets fired up when he's playing Saquon. And he might have more yards, but I'm going to be honest, Saquon's a better player, but that doesn't mean he's going to get.
Oh, and he said the only thing that matters is Saturday's game, not what anybody has done in previous seasons. So Miles sticking up for himself. But what he didn't send me in the text is how his knee feels. Again, the Eagles run their business the way they run their business. So we all understand it. They take it sometimes to ludicrous ends on keeping information tight and trying to gain a competitive advantage. Will you guys be able to get any clue as to Miles Sanders and whether he is? We all talk about Jalen Hurts and what percent he's at, and none of us know, but we judge both before and after the fact and try and come up with a number. Will you have any clue what Miles is at before the game starts? Because he's been wearing that knee brace, hasn't been as effective the last couple of weeks. You got to go back to that unbelievable 144-yard game against the Giants to see Miles at 100%. How will we know what Miles is coming into the game on Saturday?
Well, I think that knee brace, I mean, it's great for offensive and defensive linemen to wear a knee brace, but I'm not so sure it's good for a running back who makes his living on, cutting back with the football and making sharp turns on the field. So that's got to be a problem. And the Eagles will have two open practices this week, very limited amount of viewing time, but we'll get to see, if Miles is wearing that brace during practice, because to me, I think that makes all the difference in the world. If he has to wear that brace, that to me is, restrictive, doesn't favor him at all, and probably won't lead to 100+ yards rushing. So they'll have to get Scott and Kenny Gainwell a little bit more involved, in my opinion. And, we'll ask Miles, hey, how you feeling? I feel great. He won't admit to anything. So we're not going to get any answers from him. Maybe he'll text you, Jody, and
he's not texting me. I got in trouble.
He texted me, but he just did some bragging. He didn't give me any updated health information, which I'm ticked off about. Thanks a lot, Miles.
I got in trouble, as Ed knows, for noticing the knee brace. I'm going to say burst. I got in trouble for that. So, but he did ditch it in week 18. So unless he had a relapse, I'm going to assume he's not going to play with it. And that'll help because you're right. He was not the same when he was wearing that thing. So another injury thing to keep an eye on. I want to talk about the games as a whole. And I don't know how closely you guys watched. The NFL kind of went full sky judge this week, and I loved it. They were fixing stuff. They hate that term, and I don't know why, but they were fixing bad calls in real time and not going to the replay and just saying, hey, we're talking to the officials on the field, correcting stuff. I liked it. Did you guys notice that? And did you like it?
Yeah, I think I noticed it a couple of times. I can't remember the specific play. I mean, I watched so much football, and I was in and out on some of the games, and some I stayed with longer. But, yeah, of course. I mean, listen, let's not go to review every single time and take 5 to 10 minutes to try to figure out what went wrong or what went right. I mean, yeah, if we can solve it on the field, let's do it. And if we're going to start doing that, then let's open it up to, I think there was that roughing the passer penalty.
Well, that you can't change. I mean, that's the rule. I get people don't like that. But
well, if you have someone that's, buzzing down and saying, hey, that's a penalty, we need to call that, then throw the flag right then and there and call the penalty. I mean, if we're going to start doing that, where you have assistants on the field with who's ever watching, in real time the game, then let's open it up to, a couple different things that you're able to fix and correct if there's an egregious mistake. I mean, because I like it. I mean, I think it's great. We've seen the college game, I think, do that, right? I mean, they kind of buzz down.
Well, the problem with college, they do it, but they buzz down and they look. So it takes so long. What I love about what the NFL is doing is they're saying, hey, you got that wrong. Just correct it. I love it. They should have been doing this for years.
Yeah, but do you really want guys making key calls watching a TV monitor?
Yeah, I do. I want him
over
to
a
get
guy
it
who's
right.
standing 4 feet away from the play.
Yeah, because the guy standing 4 feet away from the play gets it wrong too much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier in high definition to see. I mean, they picked some spots, some really bad spots,
right?
And they moved it back, and they moved it forward, moved it back. I mean, I love it personally. I love it.
I think as long as you get it right, I mean, and they seem to get it right. I think one of the plays they kind of overturned right in real time was it was called a fumble. Tyler Huntley had the fumble there that they scooped up and they called it a fumble, but then it was ruled quickly that was a forward pass.
Yeah.
And they fixed that.
One of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, John's right. We've seen officials standing 4 feet, like the Dallas Goedert face mask penalty against Washington that led to his injury. I mean, guys are standing right there.
Where were the officials? Where was the guy in the booth? How did he not come up with that one?
Well, because they're not allowed on that type of play. Now, that's another conversation. But they weren't doing it. That's my point. They weren't doing it as much in the regular season. They were doing it all the time, trying to get crap right in the playoffs. I loved it.
So you think Roger Goodell sent out a memo to all his officials?
I do. I believe
we need to rely more on our replay guys in the booth, referees, that you should just listen to whatever they tell you and judge the game accordingly. You think that memo was sent out?
They changed. That's all I'm saying. They changed for the playoffs. And I thought it was a good change.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the officiating's been a sore spot all year with this league. So, maybe Roger's like, okay, there's going to be more eyeballs on us. Let's make sure we're giving our officials every chance to at least get this thing right without leaving egg on their face. And maybe he did send out a memo. I would say he probably did, but I like it. And that Goddard face mask thing, I think that's outside the purview of what you can and can't do. But again, if you're going to be looking at things in the sky and an official says, hey, you missed that face mask, Frank, or whoever's reffing the game, we got to throw a flag here. Then you throw the flag, whether it's 2 seconds after the play or whenever it is. I mean, just to get something right. And I think there was a chance in that situation to correct the wrong. But right now you can't. That's a subjective call. You can't change that. But I'm thinking that if they're going to start doing this, then maybe there are some things penalty-wise that they can look at quickly in the sky and say, hey, we goofed, throw the flag. Maybe that's
with the roughing the passer stuff. Look, I'm with most fans that hate these calls, like Dexter Lawrence, the player talking. That's not roughing the passer to me, but to them it is. I mean, that's a problem with the legislation. They don't like the rule, which I get. It's not a problem with the call on the field. That's what they're told to do. And there was a push in the Miami Buffalo game. Same thing. It's a penalty. I mean, it sucks that it's a penalty, but it's a penalty. That's the legislation. So they hate the legislation, but the call was right on the field for what the officials are told to do. So that's why I think that part of it is a little bit different.
Yeah, agreed. All right, Eddie K. We know the Eagles host the Giants next Saturday night. Next Sunday, it will be San Francisco against TBD, and that's not Tom Brady. That's to be determined, because the Bucs and the Cowboys have yet to play. They'll get it on tonight down in Tampa. Who you got?
Tonight's game, I got. I kind of wish Sam Howell was playing. I'd like to see another.
We hadn't even got to Sam Howell. Sam Howell's biggest fan. He's been waiting to get out of here. COVID. Sam Howell went out, and I saw this weekend that the Commanders are on record that as of right now, Sam Howell is their QB1 for the offseason.
How about
they're looking at him as their starting quarterback going forward? And I say, That's great news, Eagle fans. If Sam Howell is
Yeah.
the Commanders' starting quarterback going forward, you can pencil them in for behind the Eagles in the standings next year.
And I
But
would
Eddie
say,
and
I would add, Jody, it's January 16th. I think the Commanders have a chance to change their mind.
change
at
their
some
mind
point.
between now and
Yeah,
September.
there's
All
this
right, yeah,
guy,
you
Derek
might be
Carr.
right.
Derek Carr's hanging out there, and they're going to get a new OC in Washington. So keep an eye on Derek Carr there. I'm not sure they're going to be so in love with Sam Howell as the offseason moves on. But getting back to your question, Jody, who do I like tonight? I think the Cowboys are going to win. I know Tom Brady's 7-0 all time against the Cowboys, and I just think Dallas is the better team roster-wise, and I think they'll find a way, and it'll be TBD will be replaced by the Cowboys, and they'll go to the 49ers next Sunday in the divisional round. I think it's going to be close. Brady's playing better. This team, the Tampa Bay team, seems to be getting healthier as we get later in the season here. So I just think Dallas is the better team. They may even have the better coach in this game. As hard as that is to believe, Mike McCarthy might be the better coach.
Yeah,
but I think Dallas finds a way to win this game.
Not a big
The Mike McCarthy disrespect. I think Dallas is the better team. I'm with you. Tampa Bay's getting a little bit better, but let's be honest, they're just playing for the right to go out and get bitch slapped by Brock Purdy anyway.
That's
so
probably correct, but they both want that right. You think Cowboys are going to win tonight, McMullen?
I do think the Cowboys are going to win tonight, and I think they're the better team. And I was concerned, when I rated the potential Eagles opponents. Dallas would, to me, in the divisional round, would have been the most difficult opponent because they have the most talent. Now, I still think the Eagles would have won the game, should win the game, should have won that game. But they are more talented than the other possibilities are. And to me, it comes down to personnel. And I don't think Mike McCarthy's nearly as bad a coach as most people do. I think he gets a bad rap, to be honest. But that's
we all agree he's got a good staff. But I just got another text from TB12 said, "Did you ask McMullen if he's watched my career? Really? You think that he's going to get?"
Well, I've been,
fourth quarter. Watch what happens. Brady within a touchdown.
Well, if you can get me through the first 58 minutes and the Bucs have the ball with under 2 minutes to go and down 3, I probably agree with you. I'd probably pick the Bucs, but you do have to play 60 minutes. I think Dallas is going to handle their business in the first 55 or so.
Tom Brady will abuse the other corner, not named Quandre Diggs, in the fourth quarter and lift his team to a right. I get the Diggs is confused. We'll lift them to a victory in the fourth quarter. I think Tampa's going to win tonight. So you guys got Dallas, I got Tampa. But you're right. All three of us agree. Good for you. Have a nice flight to San Francisco and then enjoy the rest of your offseason after the game next Sunday. And neither one of these two teams could beat the 49ers in San Fran, can they?
Well, how do you guys feel about the Monday night game? I mean, to me, it seems anticlimactic playing a playoff game.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like
it
at all. I don't like it at all. I wish, they had 3 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday.
I'll probably like it at 8:15 when I sit down and I'm like, oh, what's there to watch? Oh, yeah, there's a football game on, and then I'll put it on. But it feels anticlimactic to me that after the weekend we just had, great games down to the wire, some of them. It just feels like, well, why couldn't we just throw that game on Saturday? Why couldn't we do 3 Saturday, 3 Sunday, and start talking about next week already?
Prime reason for it. Disney wrote a very big check to get a Monday night playoff game.
TV money rules the world.
That's why they're playing that game tonight rather than 3 on Saturday. Ed Kracz, it's good to see you. It's good to know you're on the improve. We appreciate you coming on board, and I promise not to punch you the next time I see you so you look like me.
Yeah. You made it through, Ed. Big test. You made it.
I can bob and weave like Sam Howell, baby. You
very good.
My footwork.
You tested it like Jalen's shoulder, and you made it through.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
You got it.
Thanks,
That's Ed Kracz of SI. Yeah, he is the biggest Sam Howell fan in the Delaware Valley, and I pimp him because of that. But he gets his just rewards because Sal did play well in that final game. Stuck it to the Cowboys, who surprisingly, both Kracz and McMullen think are going to win, despite the fact that Sam Howell lit them up last week when they were playing for a divisional possible championship. You don't think Brady's going to be able to do what Sam Howell did?
Yeah, you know how the NFL goes. When one of the problems with the Cowboys is their lack of consistency, and generally, they'll have a good game, then they'll have a bad game, then they'll bounce back. And they had a bad game. I don't think they'll have two really bad games in a row. That's part of the reason I'm picking them in this game, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they've got another bad game up their sleeve. And then, TV's going to get to go out. It's kind of be a little ironic if that's Brady's last game, which, oh, by the way, I don't think it is. I think he's going to play next year. Not in Tampa. I think he'll be somewhere else. But last game back out.
He hasn't got the wife to worry about anymore.
That's why I think he's coming back next year. I think he'll be elsewhere. I had a Tampa guest on last night, Casey Allen, who's been on with us here on Birds 365. And he said he thinks Brady's coming back to Tampa. I think he's coming back, but it won't be in Tampa. But that's
so who you got real quick? Miami, Las Vegas, San Francisco. They wouldn't dare usurp Brock Purdy for Tom Brady.
Brock Purdy is locked in San Francisco. The other two are distinct possibilities. If Tua's career is sitting in the balance, then I think Miami is a pretty damn good shot because they wanted that to happen. And the other one that has been kicked around, which could play into an overall decision of someone who will be a big name all off season. Where's Sean Payton land? I thought that we would have had an announcement yesterday that the Chargers were firing Brandon Staley, with the fact that he's just been a bad coach, period. Then he puts Mike Williams out there in week 18 when he's got nothing to win, gets him hurt. He's out of the game, blows a 27-0 lead. I thought the hammer was coming down yesterday. It didn't. I don't know if that means he keeps his job, but if he does get fired, if we find out something today, that seems the most logical spot for me. But if Peyton lands there, Herbert's going to be their quarterback. But if he goes elsewhere, Peyton and Brady have a pretty good relationship. I wouldn't count that team out of the Brady potential landing spot group either.
Yeah, well, if you think about the potentials for Sean, it would be Chargers, Broncos, Arizona. The Broncos can't move on from Russell Wilson. Arizona, they can't move on from Kyler Murray. So difficult spots, but Miami's an interesting one because of the reason you mentioned. In Las Vegas because of Josh McDaniels. Lord knows Josh McDaniels needs some help. So, Tom, if you want to help out your buddy, maybe that makes some sense.
I'll give you a prediction right now. Circle it on the calendar. Jody Mack said this on Birds 365. The starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders next year will be an expatriate, but his name is Jimmy Garoppolo, not Tom Brady.
So the Raiders are going to continue to be bad. We can chalk that up.
I think Jimmy G is the expatriate who comes in to play with McDaniels, not Brady. But we'll see. There's a whole bunch of things that can happen between now and then, including more playoff games, including the Eagle first playoff game. And that'll be against the Giants next Saturday. We'll continue to break it down for you here on Bird